So without further ado, I'd like to welcome South Wales Police to Marie and Alan to talk to us about their process evolution journey and the custody case study that they've been working on. Over to Marie and Alan.
Can I just check you can see the screen?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, Ninsal.
Thank you.
Okay, so as Ali said, I'm Marie Jones. I'm responsible for the demand and capability team within South Wales Police. The team is made up of myself as the demand team manager, along with 4 demand and capability analysts. We are a small team. The 4 analysts is actually 3.4 FTE, which I regularly remind people about. But I'm really lucky. I've got an amazing team. And in particular, I've got a couple of analysts who've really thrown themselves into the process evolution work in order to get the most out of the models. So thank you for the guys on the line today. For me, it's really important to have those analytical skills within the team in order to fully understand the models and get the most out of them. Our journey has been challenging. We invested pretty much in the process evolution products at the start of our journey. We had training in all of the models in a short space of time. That was a decision that South Wales made, as a force. For us as a team, that meant that we didn't really have any time to consolidate the learning. But for us, we are really fortunate in that we've got a really good working relationship with process evolution. We've asked lots of questions along the way, and I'd like to thank Ali and the others for their patience in supporting us. I know we've been quite challenging on times. It has paid off, and now we're in a really good position with tools being used to support evidence-based decisions on a daily, weekly basis. The presentation today, as Ali said, will be a double act between myself and my colleague Alan Bromwich. So today, I just want to start by talking you through our journey over the last 3 years, explaining how we've used the process evolution products to support projects and to inform evidence-based decisions. If anybody would like any further information on any of the projects following the presentations today, please feel free to get in touch with myself or a member of the team. I'm just conscious that I'm going to give a very high overview today. But if you do require any further details, just give us a shout. So, as you can see on the screen, our journey started really in October 2018. So that's when our journey connection with process evolution started, when process evolution were contracted to undertake a review of call handling within South Wales Police. This was very much a consultant-led project with support from my team in providing data. There were quite a few decisions made as a result of that piece of work, but the key one for me was the removal of the switchboard facility within our public service centre due to the double handling of calls that was taking place. Moving on, in 2019, we undertook a major change programme of work, which was called RADAR. That stands for Resource Allocation, Demand and Reform. RADAR considered the demand of missing persons, investigation functions, response and neighbourhood, pretty much using the response, workload profiler, neighbourhood, ramp and harm models. So pretty much, a lot of the products that we bought from Process Evolution. Again, this project was led by Process Evolution, both in terms of consultancy and the building of the models. And as a team, we very much shadowed Process Evolution in undertaking the workshops, building the models and learning from the experience of the consultants. The findings from the RADAR project have been used to inform a number of decisions, in particular for police officer uplift, for response and specialist investigation units. So not long after completing the radar project, the force made a decision to reduce the number of BCUs from 4 to 3. So as you can imagine, this posed a real challenge for us as a team, as most of our models have been built based on the original 4 BCU structure, and unfortunately there was no easy way for us to realign them to the new structure. So one of the first models that we rebuilt was the sector level response model. And in rebuilding that model, there were 2 main reasons for building it at a sector level. One, it gave us the flexibility to easily restructure the model if any further boundary changes were required. But more importantly for us, it provided us with that local level understanding of demand to inform and support future scenarios and to inform uplift decisions. And as part of that rebuild of the model, we did take the opportunity to separate out hospital watch and arrests as separate work streams, as we knew that there were being questions posed around these workload activities. So this model has been used to consider a number of scenarios. The first scenario we were asked to consider was response deployment points. As a force, our response officers tend to go back to the stations in between calls. So we were asked to see if we could tease out any improvements in performance through the use of dispatch points. This work was done using Facility Location Planner and the response model. The second scenario we were asked to look at was the blending of Cardiff Bay and Penarth response sectors. So again, using the sector response model, we were able to run a scenario to evidence that merging the 2 sectors would not have a negative impact on performance, and in fact the utilization rate would improve. So again, you know, that evidence-based decision in a what if scenario without actually having to do a live real-time pilot within the BCU. The third scenario we were asked to look at was the impact of student abstractions on response policing, in particular the utilisation rates. Within South Wales Police, all of our student officers are posted into response. So with uplift on top of normal recruitment, the student abstractions are having a significant impact on response policing. You know, I think, you know, from the conversations today, that's something that is evident in other forces. So using the sector level response model, we were able to demonstrate the level of impact. And this information is now being used to inform decisions about how we can protect response policing over the next 3 years, whilst we continue to feel the impact of student abstractions through police officer uplift. So as you'll see, the sector level model, once we got that baseline model right, we had the level of detail that we needed, and we sort of planned for future questions and scenarios. And we've fairly easily been able to use it to answer subsequent questions. So moving on to our incident resolution team. Radar project identified that response and neighbourhood officers were spending a significant amount of time dealing with grade 4 non-priority calls, often via telephone contact. In 2019, a decision was made to pilot an incident resolution team to deal with this demand. So again, using the workload profiler model, we were able to advise on a suitably sized team to pilot this activity. Following the evaluation of the IRT pilot, a decision was made to permanently establish the IRT. At the same time, a missing person team was established to deal with low risk child misfires. Again, for both of these units, the workload profiler model was used to advise on resourcing requirements. In 2020, we undertook a review of the vetting unit using the vetting profiler as part of the National Review of Vetting. The findings from this work are currently being considered as part of a wider review of vetting within South Wales Police. Next, during 2020, we looked at the workload of response sergeants using the workload profiler model. The model indicated that response sergeants were running at utilisation rates above 100%. So further work is currently underway to understand the role of the sergeant and what activities they should and shouldn't undertake, and what additional resource can be allocated as part of police officer uplift. Then moving on to earlier this year, we undertook a review of our crime integrity team. Early on, we identified that the team did not have capacity to carry out their primary role of crime audits. Through workshops, we identified inefficiencies in processes. So again, using the workload profiler, we were able to quantify the time that would be saved through process improvements, freeing up capacity for the team to carry out their core role. Then earlier this year, we did a review of custody, which Alan will talk through in more detail shortly. And then finally from me, on the back of the Crime Integrity Team project, a wider review of our Public Service Centre was commissioned. As a team, we've been asked to carry out a review of every function of the PSC, but for now we're focusing on the areas shown here. Like many other forces, South Wales Police is currently struggling to answer 999 and non-emergency calls, and we've also seen a significant increase in our digital contacts. So using the call handling profiler and the workload profiler sim, we are currently reviewing our call and digital demand. For us at the moment, one of the main challenges is fully understanding our call and digital demand and really identifying opportunities to deal with that demand differently. When we do have that better understanding of demand across each function, we will be looking to use RAMP to bring all the individual areas together into one model. And just to say, really, for us as a team, when we are undertaking reviews, it's very much about understanding opportunities for process efficiency and continuous improvement in, sort of looking at future resource levels. So moving on, this grid, this grid shows how each of the projects aligns to the process evolution products, and there were also some additional projects which I have mentioned. So for example, we have done a piece of work with our joint firearms unit using FLP around drive times for gun clubs, ranges and gun shops. We've also done some work with using RAMP for our investigation models. We've used the harm model to look at the allocation of PCSOs, and that's recently been agreed with a restructure across the BCUs. We worked with Process Evolution, a consultancy-based piece of work to look at our joint firearms unit, and likewise specialist operations. We did a piece of work, Process Evolution, consultant-led, to look at our roads policing, dog section, OST, etc. So now I think I'm going to hand over to Alan to go into custody in more detail.
Thank you, Marie. Back in back this year, March, we built our baseline custody model. This was to allow us to understand the processes, the busyness of our 4 locations. Also, a question was posed on whether we were able to think about integrating street to suite and using custody officers to do hospital watch. So obviously the correct model was the custody profiler, which is the piece of work I started back at the beginning of the year. As with all of our models, data drives a lot of the inputs. So from our response model, we sort of knew when officers were deployed, when they arrived, how long were they there, how many of them were there. But from a custody perspective, the data was a little bit less. It sort of gave us an indication of when someone was arrived and when someone was detained, but it didn't really tell us an awful lot about the process within that. So how long did it take to do a welfare check, or how long did a risk assessment take? or even who did the risk assessment. So there was an awful lot of stuff that was going on within the custody environment that we really didn't know what the process was or how long the process would take. So this black box of stuff obviously was driven then to do workshops. Before we started that workshop journey, we did look at the custody logs to sort of identify volumes of stuff, try and identify when it was happening and frequencies. We ran the workshops for the 4 suites, and then once we've done that, we cross-examined the information that we were given to see if there was any similarities or any major differences. Simple things like one of our custody suites, there is a second floor which they open up during surge times, which would involve taking a prisoner upstairs. So that obviously had a different timing to one of our newer Bridewell suites for taking prisoners down. And again, once we'd looked at the notes from our workshops, we cross-checked it against our data check. And we also had some data from other forces, again, which was helpful to make sure that we hadn't missed anything or whether we were wildly out. Once we'd got to that point, using key custody detention officers and sergeants, often ones which had worked in multiple locations over several years, they were able to give their professional judgment and actually sense check what we'd done and whether it was correct. That was thrown into the model, and again, the first run, the sense check, and then there was an element of creativity that sort of came in to building that model. So one of the examples I can give is around refreshments. All of our detainees get a nice cup of Twinings jasmine green tea served in a bone. No, who am I kidding? It's a plastic one. So we were asking them in the workshops about the tea and the refreshments, and they sort of said, well, the number of cuppas that we make is very much dependent on the number of prisoners we have. So the question was, well, how long does it take to make a cuppa? About 2 minutes, made and delivered. What about 2 cups? Is it 4 minutes? Probably not. It's seconds longer to make another cup. So when we looked at it again, actually the time spent making cuppas and delivering the refreshments is probably a lot less than what we originally thought. Again, number of prisoners are with us, it does depend on the time of day. They're less likely to want a cup of tea at 3 in the morning. They're definitely going to want one at lunchtime. And then as people start being discharged or leaving the custody, then the frequency of tea making drops, and as we go back into the evening, the likelihood it goes up, and the time to make. The reason I bring this one up is it's around level of detail within the models, and actually I suppose it's a learning curve for us to sort of work out, well, how much detail do we need to put in a model for it to reflect reality? And does the detail actually need to be on elements of the work stream that have a huge effect? So our detainee here is a foreign national. He's going to need translator line, which is going to make the process a lot longer. There's a likelihood that immigration are going to be informed, or immigration are going to be contacting us, Interpol. They might need to go to court. We found that if people were going to court, they tended to want to have a shower to look their best. And again, that's one-to-one time. It's time consuming, and it's often at busy periods of the day. There's quite a lengthy risk assessment and paperwork before we can even consider prisoner transfer. So again, it's around understanding the detail within your model and the benefits that it might have when you run the simulation, which is sort of the learning curve with all of that. That then allowed us to do the final fine tuning, again with the CDOs and sergeants, their input, and that then allowed us to do the report and the findings and the scenarios. We were able to gauge the busyness. We were able to sort of advise the organisation that the street to street and hospital watch they can't run as a trial. The simulation basically said they were very, very busy, so running the trial would have failed straight away. And likewise, we also were asked, well, what if we were to take our prisoners to the closest bridewell rather than an artificial boundary of the, well, I arrested them in this BCU, so they have to go to that one. Again, running that rather than doing it as a real activity sort of indicated that some of the bridewells would run hotter and some would run a lot cooler. So the artificial boundaries was the better fit for us. Minimum staffing levels were reviewed and advised on to reduce utilization and also to reduce the work queues and generally to give a health check. I think one of the chief inspectors actually said that the models that we use from process evolution and from our findings, it was the science and it was reinforcement of the sort of hunch you already knew, but it also gave them the confidence then to say, well, yeah, we're not going to be able to do these, and we potentially need to look at our minimum staffing levels. Back over to yourself, I believe, Marie.
Okay, thanks, Al. Thank you. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to focus on the key points for this slide. So in summary for us, there are 4 key things that have helped us along our journey. Firstly, planning. For us, it's really important that we have the data and information that we need for the models, whether this be from force systems, local spreadsheets, or workshops. For us, we always try and identify the data needs up front, do a gap analysis before we undertake any workshops, so we're clear about what information we need to collect and the level of detail needed. And we make sure that we've got those right people in the workshops and that we're prepared with those soft skills to tease out the information we need for the models. Secondly, understanding the level of detail needed for the models and planning for future scenarios that you may be asked to consider. So for us, very much geography, we came in stack when we moved from 4 to 3 BCUs. So we very much think about the level of geography we need now when we build our models, and likewise the level of detail within the work streams. Potentially, for example, the digital desk, we split out all of the individual digital demand into individual work streams, knowing that potentially we may switch off certain strands, for example, single online home. So we would be able to run those scenarios quite easily rather than having all the activity bunched into one work stream. And then thirdly, for us, process evolution being quite supportive in developing products for us. For example, as part of the investigations models, our models were really complex and we struggled to understand where some of the data had come from. So we found adding in that notes column within the work streams of the workload profiler really helped us in understanding the work that had been done by process evolution. It just helps us going forward when we come back to refreshing the models around where did the information come from. There are other things that we are, coming up against regularly now. For example, as part of the workload profiler model, we are regularly being asked to demonstrate what level of resource is required to reach different utilization targets. At the moment, we are doing this through scenarios, but I think that's conversations we're going to have with process evolution about how we could potentially build that into the model. And then finally, as part of our journey, we have identified 6 key areas that we feel are essential for all of our projects and for the success of our team. And they are clear governance, project management, data skills, and in particular access to software such as Power BI or Tableau, which we did not have initially, which did pose some problems for us. Analytical skills to be able to understand and interpret the information, a really good understanding of the process evolution models and understanding the bits that really are going to make a difference to your outputs. and then the ability to run effective workshops to tease out information that is not available from force systems. So I think that's it from me, and it's back to Alan.
Thank you, Marie. Finally, I think this is what we always try to look for as a team, the icing on the cake and the cherry. However, over the last 3 years, there's been a couple of times on that journey we've struggled to get to that, and we kind of ended up with just that bit. I asked Ali once, is it something I'm doing wrong with the models? And I think his reply is, you actually need the cake before you can ice it. So when we were doing the work on deployment points, no matter how much we did that piece of work, you actually have to have the resources to do the fine tuning. So finally, really, is even if that is the case, you can always have some sprinkles, some process evolution sprinkles on your cake if you want. Any questions?
Is that the day for that?
I just wondered on the cup of tea making whether you included the washing up as well.
That fell under the clear up the cell after a detainee work stream, I think.
Right, and then do you have to check the temperature of the tea's not too hot before you give it to the self-harmers?
Oh, we did have an issue with one of the meals once with that, funny you should say. That was a sore subject.
Yeah, I could just see you having to dip a thermometer into every cup of tea and adding 30 seconds to every time.
Yeah, not yet.
Good. No, that was very good. And I know that the cup of tea is an interesting one. We take that to the fire service when we're looking at process improvements. And you look at the worst way of making a cup of tea to define the best way. So you can have a little production line going in your kitchenette to streamline the tea making process one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I did ask him how do they do it in 2 minutes flat with delivery, and it's not a great cup of tea. It's definitely poor. It doesn't stand.
Yeah, I think you need a teapot.
It's definitely not a Twinings.
Yeah.
A bunch of time. Was there any other questions that non-tea related? Right. Okay. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Marie.
No problem.